Hi, friends. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. I'm also grateful that I'm here. As some of you may have noticed, it's been a little while since I've uploaded anything. It's been since before the Lionsgate. So I've just been on basically sabbatical, taking care of myself and my family. It's been a really rough year of the dragon so far, especially for dragon oriented people, whether it's Draco Starseed, whether you just have a strong connection energetically to dragon or dragon energy, whatever it is. I can speak for people with Draco Starseed stuff in their astrological chart. That I can speak to. It's been really rough, and as much as I've wanted to muscle through it with certain things. I just can't, and I couldn't, and I'm not even sure I'm ready to do this, right? So I've had two immediate family members die since February, one of them being my dad, which was very, very recent. We haven't even buried him or had his funeral yet. So but this eclipse season, and I will say, based on everything that I personally experienced in the lead up to and in the process of his dying, and the post period of that, and the processing of that, and everything on top, there's just so much layering going on right now with all of this, with this eclipse in general, and everything it's just so big. There's so much. It's very powerful, and I feel like I have to speak to it, even though I don't feel ready to like come out into a public space. Now, granted, I've been active with the Subscribe Star membership. I do weekly astrology and readings. There are people that are at a higher tier on Subscribestar that get monthly either check-ins or mini readings. So I've stayed very active with that, and um, will continue to do so. I'd like to say that I'm going to go back to uploading regularly on this channel, but I'm not entirely sure. But I will at least speak to the eclipses and how they're wrapped up in the equinoxes and some general things of what to expect. I am going to do a forecast for the next 6 months, but that's going to be available to those who are supporting Catalyst Energies on Subscribestar. You can find a link below if you're interested in that, because that gets you the weekly, that gets you discounts, that gets you access to these special forecasts as just part of the membership. So, in the first 30 days are free. So, it may be something worth checking out, especially if you want the 6 month forecast, because my gosh, I mean, I like the general themes I will discuss here, and certainly what to expect in the next 2 weeks just in the eclipse window. But it is, wow. That's why I'm here, because it just feels so big, and ultimately a state of purification that I don't think we could really wrap our heads quite around. And some massive transitioning, some pretty big, and a need to really not trust the plan. That's not what I'm saying, but to trust God, Great Spirit, however you identify. And if you don't have that, I would I would recommend finding, getting on that pathway, however it comes to you, because I think that's going to be really important moving forward, big time. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of you so much. And if you're new here, thank you as well. And if you like this content, you may want to consider subscribing to the channel. I do want to, I do want to be more present and get back on the horse, so to speak. I just am trying to be very gentle and easy on myself, considering everything that's happening, and I don't want to put myself under too much pressure, especially with something I really love doing. But I do have a day job as well, and I still have family obligations and responsibilities, and my own mental and emotional health to take care of. So, but with that all being said, let's just get into this report and see what comes to the surface. I know I'm not the only one, so I will share with you that my father passed away on the 6th of September, and the reports are just everywhere of just like a huge, massive shift happening then. And the things that I was party to personally in that whole process, there's no doubt whatever is happening, something pretty significant, very significant shifted and changed, and it opened something up. It allowed for a reorganization of something, that is now allowing for, I don't less resistance, I think, and that, in an effort to truly surrender. And I don't mean that in like a complacent, you just give up way, like real surrender to God, surrender to source, surrender to the great spirit, surrender to the flow of um the purifying experience that is on its way, whatever it is. So what we're going to do in this video, so that we don't turn into just me rambling for half an hour, is I'm going to go over the mechanics of eclipses. I do this every time. What are eclipses? What actually causes eclipses? What are the astronomical configurations that are responsible for eclipses, and then go into the astrological aspects and why eclipses are important to pay attention to, and what they mean at a symbolic and archetypal level, and then start to just look at the general themes with the eclipse, especially the solar eclipse, the total solar eclipse we had in April, and how important that intention, knowing that it wasn't going to materialize right then and there, as eclipses are like time capsules into these much larger wave functions of time. Knowing that they are these longer cycles of time, and then looking at where this set of eclipses, what it stands for and where it's going. And like I said, the 6-month forecast is going to be available, either for digital download and for subscribers, or just for subscribers. I'm not entirely sure yet. If you go to my website, which is linked in the description box, if it's in the store, then you can download it for a price. But if not, it'll only be available to subscribers. So you may just want to consider some free content for a month and see how it feels. So it does appear that this eclipse cycle will happen in the 2 quadrants that are going to be delineated by the equinox, which is happening on the 21st to 22nd of September. So you have this partial lunar eclipse on the 17th, we have the equinox, and then we have an annular solar eclipse, or also known as the Ring of Fire. So the equinox, the changing of the seasonal quarter, is all wrapped up in this eclipse, and there's a transition that's also happening when we get to the solstice within this eclipse cycle, because the nodes of the moon are going to shift into a new set of signs right around the time, right after we come into the solstice. And so there's a part of this, the harvest and the reaping that is going on right now, that is going to translate out into, of course, March and April, as it always does, but there's going to be a distinct shift in roughly about January into February, where the nodes of the moons change. So first, let's start talking about what are the nodes of the moon, and then we'll talk about what they mean astrologically, and then why these eclipses are important to understand in terms of long-term cycles, right? I mean, thinking about an eclipse and has something massive happening on the day of the eclipse really doesn't show an understanding of what an eclipse really represents energetically, and the potential for people using astrology as like a tool to initiate things. So this is just a little graphic of all kinds of graphics you can get about what is, the north node, the nodes of the moon. So the nodes are the place where the orbit of that body, in this case the moon, or the lunar nodes, it's where the orbit of that body crosses the ecliptic plane, which is our orbit related to the sun. And I'm not here to dispute or to talk about or debate the nature of any of these bodies or orbits, right? I mean, that's conversation that is great to have, and I like having those conversations and getting different viewpoints. But this is about observable phenomenon that you don't need to necessarily understand the nature of all of these bodies to be like, this is what's happening. I can see with my own two eyes. And unless everything is a hologram to you, in which case, why are you listening to an astrology video? Because none of that would matter if all of this was a hologram. So, because there would be no energetic potential to tap into with any of these transits. So anyway, the north node is the point of ascension, right? As the moon is in its ascending pattern, crossing the ecliptic plane, and then when it's in its descending pattern in its orbit, crossing the ecliptic plane, that is the south node. So that's a astronomical view. So whenever we have a new moon, it just needs to be on this side between the sun and the earth. But when it crosses this point of the north node and it's a new moon or a full moon crossing one of these nodes, then we get an eclipse, right? Then we get the full blockage because it's in the same place longitudinally and latitudinally. So that's the astronomical nature of eclipses, and they're predictable. They happen every 6 months because these cycles are consistent and predictable. And so every 6 months the new moon and the full moon are close enough to the nodes, right, these points, that they block partially, or in some cases fully block out the light of the sun or distort it. So a full moon lunar eclipse in the case of the 17th is going to be a north node full moon lunar eclipse. And so it will it'll actually, here we'll go to that site right now. Actually, let me bring it up, timeanddate.com, and we will be looking at this chart, just not right this second. So this is the eclipse map. You can go to a site called timeanddate.com and you can get everything eclipses. You go under sun, moon, and space on the tab, and it drops down a menu and you go to eclipses. So this partial lunar eclipse is going to be, we're going to be in the moon will be in the umbra, or the inner shadow of the earth. And so this portion of the moon right here will actually be completely blocked out by the shadow of the earth when it comes into the full moon position. So it'll mostly be full, right? And it'll be pretty big because it's closer to its perigee, where the moon is closer in the orbit than it is its apogee. So it'll be big, but there'll be a portion of it that is blocked, right? And that's important to consider, that full moons are times of culmination and illumination, and then you start deciding what needs to go. Well, when it's distorted or you don't have a full picture, then something you can't necessarily, it's not going to be as clear and obvious as most full moons are going to be. And so you take into account, like, I might feel this really strongly, but there's a portion of it that's blocked out that I can't see. I have to use, I don't know, different senses. Or in the case of eclipses, you know that what is revealed or what is illuminated or comes to fruition may be something that you don't fully realize until the cycle is coming to an end. And in the case of the degree of the full moon and where it's at in Pisces and what it represents, I would say there's something missing, that the direction that we all will be going in as a function of our service and our practice and our discipline, all of these Virgo themes, which is where the sun's going to be at the full moon, is in Virgo. And these Virgo Pisces themes of sacrifice and surrender, this is something that's going to be much more on the menu for us, for us as souls to be working with when the nodes of the moon shift in in 2025, which I'm going to show you. But this is, you can go to timeanddate.com and it'll show you all the things about the eclipse. Like it'll show you the eclipse map and the fact that the full moon lunar eclipse is going to be, pretty much covering the entire Western hemisphere. So we don't know where the West is going, and that seems pretty. That doesn't seem like a stretch based on everything that's happening. That we're going to be, going in new directions, and it doesn't always have to be the same, and we all don't have to be the same with each other. But I just don't think it's going to be quite as obvious. We just know that we have to like put our best foot forward and really do our best, right? And to actually show up, whatever that means for us. And understanding, Virgo in relation to your chart, and having a little bit of working knowledge of astrology gives you an idea of what area of life this might be happening in. So this is, again, timeanddate.com. I just like to use it because it's very comprehensive and it shows you all the eclipses that are going to be happening. So the annular solar eclipse, or the Ring of Fire solar eclipse, that's going to be on October 2nd, and that's happening out in the Pacific Ocean. The path of totality is going to be pretty much, Antarctica. That's cool. And the lower half of South America, definitely through the lowest half of South America, but and that's going to be a Ring of Fire solar eclipse. So if you go back here, and I like this feature because it does show you an animation of what it's going to look like. So it'll look like a almost total solar eclipse, but it'll have the Ring of Fire, and that's going to be a South Node eclipse. It's going to be in conjunction in the sign of Libra. So we're gonna talk about that too when we talk about these general themes. So let me bring the chart up because that's primarily what we're talking about here is the astrology chart. All right, friends. So Tuesday the 17th. So like I said, the equinox is all wrapped up into this, right? Venus has been in Libra, and so the equinox is when the sun enters 0 degrees Libra, the zodiac sign of 0 degrees Libra, and represents the harvest, right? And Venus is the planetary ruler of the sign of Libra, and she's been here now for a little while, and she's been very good at keeping us, everything's fair and balanced, right? And not in our heads about it either, like in our relationships and what feels right and what feels balanced and what feels fair and what feels steady, right? The scales of balance, right? That we can always make adjustments, and Venus is very plugged, represents our ability to be very plugged into our feels physically, right? And our senses and what feels comfortable and safe, and appeases those senses. And Venus in Libra is Lady Justice, right? She's holding the scales and she's blind because she uses her senses, not her, if she relies just on what she sees, she could be easily hoodwinked, right? It's not accurate, things look different, but they don't weigh out the same. And I just get this sense that this, because of the eclipse and then we having the equinox right after, like one of the main things that really stuck out to me in terms of like the next couple of months for just people in general is going to be, we may not know exactly where each of us is going or where our practice is going to lead us, or our dedication or our service or our disciplines, whatever they are, because that's Virgo, right? As long as we're stepping up and putting our best foot forward. But I also do feel like that there's going to be a lot of measuring our hearts against the feather. You get what I'm saying, right? That test, and that's Egyptian, right? That's Egyptian cosmology, basically, right? Weighing your heart out with a feather. I'm really for some reason, like, I am not able to like recall that that story in its entirety. But I know you know what I'm talking about. So, and it's been, like I said, it's been a long week. I'm not entirely prepared to be doing this, but I do feel like that there's a lot that wants to come through and out, and I'm gonna at least give it the opportunity to do so, and give myself the opportunity um, to be that voice, that or that mouthpiece, so to speak. So now there are things that on this public channel that I've already shared with the subscriber base, especially for the week's reading, and that I did on Friday leading into this first eclipse, and how close Venus is to Scorpio. I will say that right now in Libra, it's very matter of fact. You make adjustments so that everything is fair, everything is balanced, everything is equal. That the form of the relationship, whatever it is equal and balanced. It's going to be a different story when she comes into Scorpio, and I feel like that's where things are really going to start. Like, where it makes or breaks your faith, right? And Venus is not dignified in Scorpio. So that's something to keep an eye out for in terms of like even just the next couple of weeks and through the first quarter, right? The equinox time connected to these eclipses. So you're going to see that the moon is going to be conjunct Saturn, and then it will be conjunct Neptune as at pretty much as it's being eclipsed. And then what you're going to see is that the sun and Neptune will be exactly opposite of each other right after this. And one thing I will also bring up while I'm thinking about it before we move forward is that there is there already has been this weekend, and there will continue to be some very heavy solar weather on its way that's coinciding with this full moon lunar eclipse. So in some ways, it's almost kind of a blessing that, the full moon isn't going to entirely reflect all of that solar energy to us in our in a very vulnerable place, because that's what the moon represents, our internal and emotional landscape. It's already hard enough to like get all of this increased solar activity, but it's going to be at the time of a full moon. And so especially a full moon that's going to be very close to us, I just feel like it's going to be it's already going to be difficult. And so maybe an eclipse is not such a terrible thing, but I am going to like put that warning out. And I've done so much in terms of teaching people how I've learned to read the different facets of the solar weather and the Schumann resonance and all of that stuff. So at this point, you can always just like find older stuff if you want to figure out. And I think I might have done like a whole thing about it. About solar weather and solar flares and how to read the different graphs and get a sense of what's going on. But I will say, I mean, there's coronal holes, there are X-class flares that just went off that are sending CMEs directly at us. Like, we're gonna get pummeled around the time of the eclipse. So just also expect, everything, to be amplified. And it's even more important at that time to make sure that your own electromagnetic field, your own biofield is strong and can withstand the bombardment of the natural solar disruption. So that's going to be fun, right? I'm looking forward to that, as we're getting ready to bury my dad. So right after this eclipse, which is going to be Tuesday into Wednesday, so then the sun is going to have a trine to Uranus. Now we're in the eclipse window, right? So we're going to go from full moon to new moon. So normally during this time, you have this full illumination of and ripening and fruition of that intention that was set with the new moon. And that was a Virgo new moon. And that was a normal new moon in Virgo, but it had this component of unveiling things that have been hidden, right? And you can kind of see that that's like, oh yeah, that is in all kinds of ways within ourselves, and what's right in front of us, or again, it depends on where Virgo is in your chart. It could be within your relationships, it could be within the social relationship, whatever it is. That new moon and then you have a full moon that is not, that is distorted, and it's not going to be fully illuminated, knowing that realization is something that's going to pan out much later, right, going into March and April. But in the meantime, we're still living with the rest of the transits as they are in this moment. We still have to act, we still have to make decisions, or not make decisions. We still have to be very discerning, and I think that's where the Virgo energy really comes in handy, and really embracing it, because when the nodes shift and the south node is in Virgo, we'll realize that, like, oh yeah, I know what that feels like, to be disciplined, to be to be meticulous, to be one foot in front of the other. Like, you have to practice, right? You don't just like, and you have to, there's a component of suffering that goes along with the Virgo energy, because you're just doing the thing you need to do, one foot in front of the other. You build the routine, right? You do the healing work. It's the function of your structure, whatever that is, and that's your works and your labors, right? And so this Virgo energy does feel really important to continue embracing, even if the direction that it propels us into is not going to be as obvious right this moment. But there are other things surrounding it that's going to be really important. So right after that, you see the sun in Virgo. There's this loose Earth trine. Now, the exact trine with the sun and Uranus will happen, going into right after the eclipse, like Thursday the 19th. And that's usually when we get some, that's usually when you get some positive, adventurous, and progressive and experimental types of feelings, and just feel more prone to that type of mindset, and things like heightened intuition, flashes of insight. Now, just keep in mind that Uranus is retrograde, so it might not necessarily be something that is very obvious, or maybe something that you've already that's already kind of shifted for you, and now it's processing in a different way. It's kind of hard to say with Uranus, because even without the retrograde, it's not something you can really predict. It just turns things on its head. But this trine can lead to like greater self-awareness and that heightened intuition, and you get these flashes of insight. And it's a time of unexpected change, and it's usually full of opportunity and excitement. It's something that you can get excited about. You're going to feel like trying something new and something original outside of what you normally do. This is a time of change. I just want to caution people around this, because we're in an eclipse window. We have Mercury opposite Saturn, that just happened before this, which really can be quite a serious thinking and conversation, also along these Virgo Pisces lines here, of what the functionality of our structure, our works and labors. And Mercury likes to be, it rules the sign of Virgo, and so it's the number cruncher, as well as the psychopomp of Mercury and Gemini. It's more of the hermit, right, rather than the magician when Mercury is in Virgo. So there's a maturity here and a practiced nature. But anytime anything is in opposition to Saturn, it's very difficult. It is a line in the sand in a lot of ways. And so when Mercury is opposite Saturn like this, especially the retrograde, I mean, there's difficult conversations. There's a sense of maybe isolation in terms of being able to communicate, the possibility of bad news, challenging situations. You're seeing things, especially if you've been neglecting them. Saturn is our responsibility, so we might have to be confronting some things. So there's this positive outcome and change that's like right here, with especially with Pluto, right? You see that there's like a really loose Earth trine, and really, if you look at it within a day, you could see the kite that's building with Neptune involved, but then it goes away. So, and it's this opposition with Neptune, right? It's this opposition with Neptune that I really want to bring out, because while we may be feeling really like trying something new and getting kind of caught up in the change, or some sort of significant change, or something exciting that happens, or something unexpected that comes our way. Then we have this opposition with Neptune and the sun, and it makes us very susceptible to confusion and deception. So just know that this is also part of the conversation. Now, granted, these two are in a sextile, which is usually a very harmonious, transformative type of thing. It's just that, remember, the sun represents our ego expressing herself. And so when it's opposite Neptune, and Neptune is the great dissolver, especially in its retrograde, right? It is dissolving, and it's not a lot of smoke and mirrors. It's not like, it's not like the dry ice. It is like, I am seeing everything for what it is, and it can be very difficult to it drives people mad, right? When things are very clear, or there's like a willful ignorance. And there's a lot of that. There is so much of that going on, and has been since this retrograde of Neptune. Gosh, it is. I guess I'm not surprised, but sometimes I'm like, wow, like it is definitely a willful ignorance. So Sun opposite Neptune, there's a lot of conflict, and especially if, because we've come so far with all this Virgo energy, and really identified with this role as like very practiced and disciplined seeker in some ways, and in this opposition to Neptune, it can be really disappointing. There can be some serious disappointment and loss, especially if you can't deal. Now, if the Mercury opposite Saturn during this time, if you can really harness that, and yeah, there's some harsh conversations happening, but there's a necessity to really confront some things. This may not be nearly as disappointing, and bring out that feeling of loss, right? But there may be weakened defenses. At the very least, if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is, right? Say no. Learn to say no and walk away. This actually came up in the reading this week, the weekly reading that I did, like really strongly. Agree to do nothing. That's going to be very difficult when you have this Sun trine Uranus that is just like, hey, like, unexpected change. Things kind of pop up out of nowhere. And then it's in a trine to Pluto as well. And it's just like, wow, the power is really there. Just be very clear with yourself, all of us, about our intentions, right? There can only be a yes or no. And like, if you try to gray area, especially with Neptune in its retrograde, like it's dissolving everything down. I mean, there's so much potential for deception and lying. You don't want to, dig a deeper hole for yourself if you're already doing that one, because you're having a hard time facing disappointment and discouragement, right? And we all go through that. So it'll be tempting to escape harsh realities of life through all kinds of substances. So you become more susceptible to things like addiction and overdose, and people ripping you off when the sun is opposite Neptune. Now, it doesn't mean there's nothing good about this transit. If anything, it will force us to it will force us to reinforce the root system, to return back to the root system, right? There may be maybe some sort of crisis that that, and everything is like upended, but we have to return back to the root of what led to successful growth and fruition in the first place. It's really easy to just replace the old boss with the new boss, right? And I feel like the sun opposite Neptune, you have to be really, I think, vulnerable to get totally pulled into this. I think that what it'll do is reinforce, what it is that really represents that root power. Oh, there's my alarm, folks. Root power, and I think it'll really reinforce that but it'll be through a challenge. And it's not to say there aren't things that we shouldn't, take advantage of, or like have those flashes of insight or inspiration. And with Pluto still this last round in Capricorn, there's a lot still to learn here about the, what it's like for these massive institutions to also be subject to the Grim Reaper, right? That's what Pluto is. The power of Pluto is the infinite nature of the soul, because that's what continues to come back into experience over and over again. And we have the potential to learn from those experiences, but you have to go through the portal of the dying process in order to have that. And then we have the amnesia. So that's a different conversation. My point is that even just leading up to the equinox, there's going to be a lot of possible, like, rapid, unexpected opportunity and change. And then, lots of potential for being pulled back into the same old bullshit with just a different label, with the sun opposite Neptune. And even more so because the full moon is conjunct Neptune and it's eclipse. So it's not going to be obvious. And so you're going to have to trust source or the great spirit. And again, it's not about complacency. There's nothing about Virgo that is complacent. You just eye on the prize, right? What does abundance mean to you? And stay, focused on what you are bringing to fruition. And those opportunities that you should act on are going to present themselves. Okay, so now we get to the equinox, which is actually the 21st, 22nd of September. And let's skip ahead here to the actual equinox, or I'm sorry, the annular solar eclipse, because that's what we're really looking at here. And then I'm going to show you the total solar eclipse from April and just kind of remind ourselves of where we've been and where we're going. I'd like to point out a couple things as we get close now to that eclipse. You can see that Mars is conjunct the star Sirius. It's going to be in a trine with Saturn. I mean, that usually is one of those moments where you really knuckle down. And we're talking about water signs. Now, I will say that Mars is not at its best in Cancer. It is in its exaltation in Capricorn, so it's in its fall position in Cancer. People are really acting from their feels, very spontaneously, very impulsively, from their feels, from their sense of protection. Oh boy, and get used to it, because we're going to have a Mars retrograde that barely gets into Leo and comes back into Cancer throughout this whole season, right? And so it's important, especially because the nodes are going to be shifting out of Aries and Libra, and Aries is also the territory of Mars. So there's nothing wrong with, like, really embracing our individual spark of life and our God-given right actually to exist, by being endowed with that spark of life, by being endowed with a soul, right? So this is now we're leading up to the eclipse at this point. You can see that there's a Mercury Sun conjunction in Libra, pretty much right on the south node. So there's a lot of the Libra energy that is going to be reinforced in terms of balance and the form of relationships being balanced, right? Libra is the scales of balance, and so it is about equity in the eyes of, or equality in the eyes of the law, right? I mean, Libra is about the balance of relationship and the necessity for it's always dynamic, and things needing to make adjustments in order to be balanced and fair. And there's a lot of that's still present, and that's going to be, that's where the new moon is going to be, is in Libra. It's going to be a south node eclipse, and I feel like there will be, how do we take what we have learned about ourselves and apply it to relationship in a way that actually that can be transmitted. I think there's going to be an issue with transmission and instruction and being able to share and to balance, in order to balance out these relationships or find balance in the social order. That's, Libra in the seventh house really does represent a lot of the social contract. as well as personal relationships. And it's any type of committed relationship, right, where there's a contract, where there's a commitment, where there is an agreement, and that there needs to be adjustments so that it's fair. There's going to be a lot of issues over the next 6 months, especially with this eclipse, I think, in terms of establishing that and being able to pass on that information, to be able to communicate it, in a way that is heard and that is integrated. I think, again, that's going to be something that we would want to happen on the short term, and it's going to be something that's going to be drawn out into the next 6 months as we are finishing up, the nodes in Aries and Libra. So I want to bring your attention to this in particular, because when we go back to the solar eclipse from April, I want you to remember where you're seeing Mars now, currently at this time, and where it was at the time of the last solar eclipse, and the journey that it's been making. Mars is really drawing my attention during this time, just because there's going to be a retrograde back into Cancer, because the North Node is moving out of its sign, which is Aries. The projection of ourselves and really trusting our instinct and acting from it, and especially acting on our feels in Cancer. And their personal feels, right? Cancer is about how we feel on the inside individually, okay? But this connection to Saturn is going to be one of those moments that this trine is going to be like a really stable, very stabilizing force in terms of our individual projection from our feels. And Saturn in Pisces, that is just like an anchor into spirit in a lot of ways. In some ways it's annoying, right, because it's so deeply entrenched that there's no getting away from it. It is like deeply embedded all the way through, and it's not going anywhere, especially in its retrograde. It's not going anywhere. And so but this connection, it's an anchor in a good way. It's a tether in some ways, and it gives patience and determination to an energy that is often just very spontaneous, impulsive, and very very immature and innocent in some ways. It's weird to say that about Mars, the god of war, but it's it's action, action man. Right? It's the superhero complex, and acting from its feels of protection and a sense of guardianship. You're going to want it to be anchored by something like Saturn, that is responsibility and ancestry and the bones and the structure of society. So that's going to be something that to pay attention to towards the end of September into October, because that's when we're going to be having the eclipse, which is the 2nd. So let's look at that day real quick. And then what we're going to do is go through and look at the larger pattern. So you can see that the moon and the sun and Lilith and Mercury, they'll all be, and obviously the South Node, they're all going to be conjunct with each other on the 2nd. So there's just going to be this huge pile up in Libra at the time of the eclipse. The social order being balanced out, and how do we adjust ourselves and where we've come from in a way that makes sense to where we're going and what we're trying to transmit out there. There's a strong component to this particular eclipse symbolically to the process of teaching and transmission, and for the sake of sharing information, but also again balancing the social order. Actually, I'm going to read. It's a professor peering over his glasses at his students. Problems attending the transmission of knowledge in a special cultural setup, right? There's a lot of information that needs to get from, the person who has spent all the time gathering it and learning it to those who are ready to receive it. And I think that that's that seems like a delicate matter, and that's something else that's going to just be it's just going to be drawn out over the next 6 months. It's going to be pretty interesting. And with Mercury involved, I think that's, that certainly is going to help a little bit in terms of the communication itself and the means in which it happens, Mercury being the agent of that. So let's go back. There's one thing I want to point out as we uh, do a little bit of a retrospective here. Let's go back 6 months because I want to look at that eclipse, that total solar eclipse, right? That everybody talked about. It was on, right? It was on April 8th, and everybody was expecting the end of the world right then and there. Not realizing that it would be now that this energy was going to really start to unfold. And I just want to point out, because this is going to be a lot more relevant for those who end up listening to the second part in the actual forecast of the 6 months ahead, because there are things that are going to really come out about this and the timing of things. So what I want to point out here, number one, as I showed you, so this is a little bit of a preview. We're going to look at where Pluto is. It was in Aquarius and also not retrograde yet. So that's something that will be different. You see where Mars is at this time. Mars is coming into a conjunction with Saturn. So not nearly as stable as the trine with Saturn is going to be. This is much more of a, an activation, and it could, get you prepared to, I think that there were a lot of people who were ready to go out in front and lead the troops into battle then, and not really realizing that they're going to really need that energy come now, basically. So what I want to point out is that the full moon, or the eclipse, the total solar eclipse that split through the United States on April 8th was at 19 degrees, between 19 and 20 degrees. And it was conjunct Chiron, which is the comet asteroid figure that is between Saturn and Uranus. And I've done a whole series on Chiron in the Catalyst Classroom material that's part of the subscriber. One of the subscriber benefits for the Catalyst Classroom. I did a whole thing on Chiron that is still available up if you end up subscribing to that tier. So I'm not going to go into all that right now. However, 20 degrees Aries in terms of Sabian symbols is a young girl feeding birds in winter. And this was the degree. This was the degree of the eclipse. And I knew at the time that it was really going to take us to this moment here. And did we really, at a deep level, cultivate that capacity, right? Are we prepared to help take care of those who aren't able to take care of themselves this winter? Have we developed a sense of compassion? Because that's what this really represents, overcoming crises through compassion. And now here we are wrapping up this eclipse cycle, starting a new one. And I think now's the time to really evaluate if if you are truly prepared to overcome crises through compassion. And there's been, I'm sure, plenty of opportunity since this time to really practice that. And right now, the fruits of that and what we're reaping from that are becoming much more obvious to us. If you look at the chart now, I mean, you see how, and Jupiter and Uranus hadn't even come into their conjunction yet, so that really triggered something in terms of hope and something to look forward to that maybe we wasn't quite obvious at that time. Now we come here, let's go back 6 months to right now and look at the chart, right? And this is going to be October 8th after after the eclipse, but you can see that things are much more balanced out. There's way more Libra in the chart right now, and at this time, certainly the South Node, but Mercury and Venus has been moving through Libra. So I also do feel like that her transit through Libra has allowed us to realistically gauge if we are able to overcome crises through compassion, if we are able to experience a sense of balance and balanced relationship. And Venus is going to, there's no way not to be honest about it, because you can't not, you can ignore what you're feeling, but you become very uncomfortable when we're talking about Venus. It's going to be really hard as she moves through Scorpio, because then we have to really feel into the what is created out of those relationships. And no matter how you swing it, it's going to be uncomfortable with Venus and Scorpio, right? It's not an easy energy to be with. So now I want to show you where this is going in 6 months, just to get an idea of what things may look like. And as you can see, 6 months from October, you're going to see that Neptune has come into Aries, that the nodes of the moon have come into Pisces and Virgo, that Mercury and Saturn and Venus are all in conjunction in late Pisces. And Jupiter and Mars are still in Cancer, right? Because they're both going to be retrograde through this whole eclipse cycle. And so there's going to be a lot of emotional recoiling with Mars in its retrograde coming back into Cancer, and Jupiter retrograde in Gemini. I think there's going to be a pretty significant reevaluation of what people think they know, what information they believe in. When you're talking about Jupiter, there may be an inner expansion of these ideas, but the Jupiter and the Mars retrogrades in these two areas, that they are not at their best, is going to be very telling. And I would say, just on that alone, based on that alone, I'd say the next 6 months are going to be pretty difficult and shocking, and people are going to emotionally recoil. They're going to seriously reevaluate belief systems, and what they think they know and understand, based on what they thought they knew. I think people are really going to go back over some thoughts and ideas with this Jupiter retrograde, absolutely. And then Neptune coming into Aries. I mean, it will retrograde back into Pisces again, absolutely, but then it's going to be in a conjunction with Saturn at 0 degrees Aries, right? So even paying attention to when the node crosses that point is going to be important, which is going to roughly be, I think, in January. So you can see that those quarters really do kind of match up to where the nodes are going to shift into new energies. And again, remember, the nodes of the moon, the north and south node, they represent the trajectory of the soul, right? The north node being where the soul is pulling us towards in order to learn and to grow, and the south node being where we came out of, right? The tail of the dragon. And so, yeah, where are we at here? January, early January, the nodes are at 0 degrees. This is a point to pay attention to. The astrology just leading up to the inauguration in early January to to the 21st, when the sun comes into Aquarius. It's outrageous. So there'll be plenty of time to talk about those things. So I'm just going to leave it there for now, my friends. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of you so very much, and being patient with me and being understanding of my situation. I like to say that I'm going to be uploading more. We'll see what happens. I was on a pretty consistent schedule, but we'll see what makes the most sense. But if you are interested in weekly content, or interested in much more of a one-on-one interaction on a regular basis, you may want to consider a monthly subscription. Everything you need is in the description box below, and subscribers do get access to the actual 6-month forecast that I'm going to record after this. So hopefully that will come out sooner than later. It's pretty late for my bedtime these days, so it might have to wait a couple days. So, in the meantime, you can always subscribe and get kind of peruse and see what's available already if you're waiting for this to drop. And I'd say Wednesday, so that'd be the 18th. That would be like the full, okay, we've passed the full moon lunar eclipse, we're still in the lunar eclipse phase, still in the eclipse window. Now let's look at the next 6 months of transits and see what to really look forward. So thank you very much, my friends. I really appreciate all of you so very much. Don't forget to like, subscribe. You know the drill. If you want to support the channel, then those types of things signal to the AI overlords that you want to influence the algorithm in a certain way. So we all do our part as best we can. So I look forward to your comments. Everything you need is in the description box below. Thank you so much. Enjoy the eclipse energies as much as you can. And I will see you on the flip side. Take it easy.